Hello and welcome back to Monster Mechanics, where we dive deep into the monsters, mechanics, and mayhem of Dungeons & Dragons. Today we're ranking every true dragon with their breath weapon. Yes, you heard that right. From the iconic chromatic and metallic dragons to the mysterious gem dragons and beyond, we're analyzing their breath weapons and ranking them from devastating to not so much. Now before we begin, let's clear a few things up. Some of these dragons have limited official information inspired by earlier editions of D&D. We've taken a few liberties to extrapolate and scale these stat blocks so they all stand on the same playing field as adult dragons. And yes, we're focusing strictly on true dragons with breath weapons. So no, your favorite song dragon didn't make the cut, and that's by design. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to keep up with all of our monstrous rankings and tactical guides. And with that out of the way, let's dive in and see which dragons dominate the battlefield, and which ones could use a little bit more firepower. Starting off strong, the Red Dragon is the epitome of draconic power, and its fire breath is nothing short of apocalyptic. This 60-foot cone of fire forces every creature in its path to take a DC 21 dexterity saving throw, or they're going to take 63 fire damage on a failed save, or half as much on a success. This isn't just a strong attack, it's iconic. The sheer area and damage output of this breath weapon make it one of the most devastating in the entire game. Red dragons don't just unleash their fire breath randomly. They plan their attacks, forcing their enemies into tight spaces or vulnerable positions before turning them into ash. Without question, the Red Dragon's Fire Breath weapon earns it an easy spot to start us off in S tier, setting the gold standard for destruction. The White Dragon's Icy Breath is about as straightforward as it gets. This is a 60-foot cone of cold that forces every creature in the area to make a DC 19 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they take 54 cold damage, or half as much on a success. And while this damage is decent, cold is also one of the most commonly resisted damage types in all of D&D, and while white dragons aren't exactly known for their creative tactics, they tend to charge in and use their icy breath and rely on brute force to finish the job, making their combat style as predictable as their breath weapon. White dragons are going to land in D tier because their breath weapon lacks the raw power, versatility, or strategic options needed to compete with their chromatic siblings. The Blue Dragon's Lightning Breath is a masterclass in precision and devastation. It's a 90-foot line of lightning that's 5 feet wide, forcing every creature in its path to make a DC 19 dexterity saving throw. And on a failed save, targets take a shocking 66 lightning damage, or half as much on a success. What makes this breath weapon stand out, though, is its incredible range. While the narrow line means it's harder to hit multiple targets, it's perfect for focusing on high-value enemies, or striking down an entire row of foes who aren't paying attention to their positioning. Blue Dragons are going to get an A tier because their breath weapon combines raw power, precision, and range, making it one of the most strategic and impactful attacks in the entire game. The Green Dragon's Poison Breath is as insidious as its personality. This 60-foot cone of poisonous gas forces creatures in the area to make a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they take 56 poison damage, or half as much on a success. While the damage output is pretty solid here, poison damage suffers from one major drawback. It's one of the most commonly resisted damage types in Dungeons & Dragons. Many adventurers, especially at higher levels, will be equipped to just shrug this one off. Green dragons rely more on their cunning and manipulative nature than their breath weapon to dominate encounters. That makes their poison breath feel more like a tool to weaken their enemies rather than a devastating finisher. They're going to be getting a C tier for being thematic but situational in its effectiveness. The Black Dragon's Acid Breath is vile and it's an effective weapon. It's a 60-foot line of acid, 5 feet wide, forcing every creature in its path to make a DC 18 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, targets take 54 acid damage, or half as much on a success. And while this damage is pretty respectable, the narrow line makes it harder to hit multiple enemies unless they're conveniently lined up. Black dragons excel at creating moments of fear and chaos, and their acid breath is more of a psychological damage issue. It dissolves the gear and corrodes defenses, more than an outright annihilation. Black dragons land in B tier, because their breath weapon is solid and thematic, but it lacks the versatility and area coverage of higher tier dragons. The Ruby Dragon is one of the most mysterious and powerful gem dragons, wielding a breath weapon as dazzling as it is devastating, and it's also a personal favorite of mine. This 60-foot cone of radiant and fire energy forces every creature in the area to make a DC 20 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 60 combined radiant and fire damage, or half as much on a success. What makes this breath weapon exceptional is the dual damage type. Fire is destructive and thematic, while radiant damage is much harder to resist, ensuring this breath weapon is as versatile as it is powerful. The combination not only maximizes damage, but also allows the Ruby Dragon to challenge a wider variety of foes effectively. The Ruby Dragon gets an obvious S tier here because their breath weapon blends the raw destructive power with versatility, making them a formidable force on any battlefield. The Sapphire Dragon's breath weapon is as refined and tactical as the dragon itself. This 60-foot cone of high-pitched, nearly inaudible sound forces all creatures in the area to take a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they take 45 thunder damage and are incapacitated until the end of their next turn. On a successful save, they just take half damage and avoid the incapacitation. The combination of solid thunder damage and debilitated incapacitation effect makes this breath weapon a serious threat. Taking away a creature's ability to act for a full turn can completely disrupt the flow of battle, giving the Sapphire Dragon the upper hand. Sapphire Dragons earn an easy spot in A tier because their breath weapons blend strong damage with battlefield control, perfectly fitting their role as tactical masterminds. The Emerald Dragon's breath weapon is as enigmatic as the dragon itself. This 60-foot cone of psychic dissonance forces all creatures in its area to take a DC 18 intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, creatures take 42 psychic damage and suffer a debilitating effect. Until the end of their next turn, any attack roll or ability check they make is reduced by a D6, and on a successful save, they take half as much damage with no additional effects. Psychic damage is rarely resisted, making this breath weapon a consistent threat. The added debuff, reducing attack rolls and ability checks, can completely derail an opponent's strategy, weakening both offensive and utility actions. Emerald Dragons earn their rank in A tier because their breath weapon blends a reliable damage with a disruptive effect that can tip the scales in their favor, perfectly complementing their inquisitive and calculating nature. The Amethyst Dragon's breath weapon is as majestic as its shimmering scales. The 90-foot cone of gravitational force begins as a shining bead of energy in the dragon's mouth, which it releases into a massive wave. Each creature in the cone must make a DC 20 strength saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 45 force damage and has its speed reduced to 0 until the start of the dragon's next turn. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and avoids the movement debuff. Force damage is one of the most reliable damage types in the entire game. Practically nothing resists it. Combine that with a crippling speed reduction, and you've got a breath weapon that's both devastating and highly strategic. Stopping creatures in their tracks allows the dragon to reposition, control the battlefield, and focus fire to immobilize enemies. Amethyst Dragons secure their spot in S tier because their breath weapon combines high damage, exceptional reliability, and unparalleled battlefield control. It's the perfect embodiment of their cosmic and logical nature. The Crystal Dragon's burst of brilliant radiance is as dazzling as the dragon itself. This 60-foot cone of radiant energy forces all creatures in its area to make a DC 17 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, creatures take 40 radiant damage, or half as much on a success. But here's the twist. The dragon absorbs a portion of this radiant energy, gaining 15 temporary hit points after using its breath weapon. Radiant damage is fantastic. It's rarely resisted and thematically perfect for the Crystal Dragon's luminous nature. While the damage is slightly lower than some of the other dragons, the added bonus of temporary hit points makes this breath weapon feel both like an offensive and a defensive tool. Crystal Dragons land in B tier, because while their breath weapon is unique and reliable, the lower damage output holds it back from reaching the top tiers. Still, it's a brilliant tool for sustaining them in longer fights. The Topaz Dragon's yellowish necrotic breath embodies its grim and aloof nature. This 60-foot cone of necrotic energy forces all creatures in the area to take a DC 17 Constitution saving throw, and on a failed save, creatures take 35 necrotic damage and are weakened until the end of their next turn. A weakened creature suffers disadvantage on strength-based ability checks and strength saving throws, and its weapon attacks that rely on strength deal half damage. On a successful save, creatures take half damage and avoid the weakening effect. While necrotic damage is rarely resisted, the damage output here is a bit lower compared to the other dragons. However, a weakening effect adds a layer of utility, especially against strength-based characters like barbarians and fighters. This breath weapon is less about outright destruction and more about disrupting the enemy's effectiveness in combat. Topaz Dragons land in B tier because their breath weapon is unique and strategic, but the lower damage keeps them from climbing to the higher tiers on our list. The Obsidian Dragon's molten breath is as destructive and unrelenting as the dragon itself. This 90-foot cone of molten rock and flame forces all creatures in the area to take a DC 21 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, creatures take 36 bludgeoning damage, and 36 fire damage, and they're restrained by a newly formed obsidian and volcanic rock. A restrained creature must use its action and succeed on a DC 17 strength saving throw, or be freed by an ally to escape. On a successful save, creatures take half damage and avoid being restrained. But that's not all. The affected area becomes difficult terrain for 10 minutes, making it harder for enemies to maneuver even after the breath attack. This breath weapon combines a devastating damage with a battlefield control, creating chaos and slowing down your foes. Obsidian Dragons are actually going to land in A tier because their breath weapon deals high damage, powerful crowd control, and lasting terrain disruption. And while not quite as universally devastating as S tier options, the sheer tactical value of this breath weapon makes it a nightmare to face. The Beljuril Dragon, attuned to the power of Earth and its shifting energies, wields a breath weapon that reflects its seismic domain. Its breath of raw crystalline energy manifests a 60-foot cone, forcing all creatures in the area to make a DC 19 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, creatures take 40 radiant damage, and jagged crystalline shards embed themselves in the ground, transforming the area into difficult terrain for 10 minutes. On a successful save, creatures take half damage and avoid the terrain effect. This breath weapon stands out for its ability to combine solid radiant damage, which is rarely resisted in D&D, with battlefield control. The lingering, difficult terrain can limit movement, trap enemies, or force them into unfavorable positions, giving the Beljuril Dragon a tactical edge. Beljuril Dragons earn their A-tier ranking because their breath weapons blend reliable damage with lasting environmental impact, making them a formidable force in combat. The Platinum Dragon, the rarest and most divine of all dragons, wields a breath weapon as awe-inspiring as its legendary status. Its 60-foot cone of radiant light forces all creatures in the area to make a DC 21 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 63 radiant damage, and on a successful save, they take half damage, but even then, the sheer power of this attack leaves its mark. Radiant damage is one of the hardest hitting types to resist, making this breath weapon incredibly reliable. It combines immense destructive power with divine elegance, reflecting the Platinum Dragon's role as the pinnacle of draconic might and wisdom. The Platinum Dragon easily earns its spot in S tier. Its breath weapon is not only devastating, but also fitting for a creature of such mythic proportions, embodying the essence of celestial power. The Gold Dragon, the most majestic of the metallic dragons, boasts not one, but two powerful breath weapons, each suited to different challenges. First, we have its fire breath. The dragon exhales a 60-foot cone of fire, forcing all creatures in the area to make a DC 21 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 66 fire damage. On a successful save, they take half damage. This is one of the most devastating breath weapons in the entire game, with massive damage and a wide coverage that can annihilate an entire battlefield. For their second breath weapon, they have Weakening Breath. The dragon exhales a 60-foot cone of weakening gas, forcing all creatures to make a DC 21 strength saving throw. On a failed save, they gain disadvantage on strength-based attack rolls, checks, and saving throws for 1 minute. The effect can completely neutralize melee fighters like barbarians or paladins, disrupting their effectiveness in combat. The Gold Dragon definitely deserves S tier because of its dual breath weapon options, combining an overwhelming destruction power and incredible utility. Whether it's melting enemies with fire or crippling them with weakness, the Gold Dragon's breath weapons define versatility and power, benefiting the most revered of the metallic dragons. The Silver Dragon, known for its wisdom and grace, wields 2 breath weapons that reflect its balance of power and control. First, it has Cold Breath. This 60-foot cone of icy blasts forces creatures to make a DC 20 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they take 58 cold damage, or half as much on a success. While cold damage isn't the most difficult to resist, the wide area here and solid damage output makes this a formidable attack. Additionally, they have Paralyzing Breath, where the dragon exhales a 60-foot cone of paralyzing gas, forcing creatures to make a DC 20 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they're paralyzed for a minute. The paralyzed creature is completely helpless, unable to move, attack, or even speak. The effect can be devastating, and although creatures can repeat the saving throw at the end of each one of their turns, losing even 1 round of combat can turn the tide of battle. The Silver Dragon lands in A tier because its breath weapons combine respectable damage with devastating CC effects. While it's not purely destructive as some of the S tier dragons, the paralyzing breath alone makes the Silver Dragon a significant threat on any battlefield. Iron Dragons, with their fierce presence and cunning, wield 2 distinct breath weapons that reflect their balance of power and manipulation. First, they have Lightning Breath. This 60-foot line of lightning, 5 feet wide, forces creatures to make a DC 19 Dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 54 lightning damage, or half as much on a success. While the Lion Breath weapon lacks the wide coverage of a cone, its long range and solid damage make it a powerful tool for targeting tightly grouped enemies or high-value foes. They also have Charming Breath, which is a 60-foot cone of gas that forces creatures to make a DC 19 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they're charmed by the dragon for 1 minute, treating the dragon as a trusted ally. While charmed, they'll act in the dragon's best interests, offering protection and treating its requests favorably. The effect ends early if the dragon or its allies harm the creature, but even a moment of confusion can disrupt an enemy's plans and turn the tide of battle. The Iron Dragon lands in A tier because its breath weapons can provide both raw, destructive power and battlefield control through manipulation. The combination of lightning and charm makes it a versatile and unpredictable opponent. The Electrum Dragon's breath weapon is as unusual as its philosophical nature. It exhales a 40-foot long cone of shimmering gas, 30 feet in diameter at its widest point, forcing creatures in the area to make 2 saving throws. Each creature must succeed on a DC 18 saving throw for Constitution to avoid enfeeblement, and a DC 18 Wisdom saving throw to avoid confusion. With enfeeblement, affected creatures are weakened for 1 turn, reducing their melee attacks to deal only half damage. In confusion, for up to 9 rounds, creatures can act unpredictably, potentially wasting their turns or harming allies, as determined by the spell's effects. While this breath weapon doesn't deal damage, its dual debuffs can create chaos on the battlefield, particularly against melee-heavy parties. Enfeeblement neutralizes strength-based fighters, while confusion can turn entire encounters into unpredictable, chaotic struggles. Electrum Dragons land in B tier because their breath weapon lacks raw damage, but compensates with potential debuffing and battlefield disruption. It's an unusual but effective tool that can make the Electrum Dragon a unique and tricky foe to face. The Bronze Dragon, known for its martial prowess and loyalty to good, has 2 breath weapons that reflect its strategic mindset. First, it has Lightning Breath. This 90-foot line of lightning, 5 feet wide, forces creatures in its path to make a DC 19 Dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 66 lightning damage, or half as much on a success. The long range and high damage output here makes this an excellent weapon for punishing enemies who don't carefully manage their positioning. They also have Repulsion Breath. This is a 60-foot cone of repulsion energy that forces creatures to make a DC 19 Strength saving throw. On a failed save, they're pushed 60 feet away from the dragon, potentially into environmental hazards, off ledges, or simply out of melee range. While this breath weapon doesn't deal damage, its ability to control the battlefield is immense, especially when combined with the dragon's other attacks or lair terrain. The Bronze Dragon lands in A tier because its breath weapons combine raw power with tactical versatility. Whether it's striking from a distance with lightning or forcing enemies into unfavorable positions, the Bronze Dragon is a force to be reckoned with. The Mercury Dragon, as whimsical and unpredictable as its liquid metal namesake, wields two breath weapons that reflect its erratic nature. First, it has Poison Breath. This 60-foot cone of poison forces all creatures in the area to make a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they take 54 poison damage, or half as much on a success. While the damage is respectable, poison resistance is common, which can limit its effectiveness against certain enemies. They also have Blinding Breath, which is a 60-foot cone of blinding gas that forces creatures to make a DC 18 Constitution saving throw, and on a failed save, they're blinded for a minute, unable to see anything. While blinded, creatures have disadvantage on attack rolls, and attack rolls against them have advantage. Affected creatures can repeat the saving throw at the end of their turn to end the effect early, but even one round of blindness can be devastating in combat. The Mercury Dragon is going to land in B tier because its brutal breath weapon offers a mix of reliable damage with potent crowd control. And while neither option is game-breaking, their combination of utility and unpredictability makes this dragon unique and formidable foe. The Steel Dragon, a clever and sociable creature often found blending in with humanoid societies, wields two distinct breath weapons that reflect its versatility and cunning. First, it has Acid Breath, which is going to be a 60-foot cone of acid, forcing all creatures in the area to make a DC 21 Dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 58 acid damage, or half as much on a success. This wide area and solid damage output makes this a reliable offensive tool, particularly against groups of tightly packed enemies. They also have Deafening Breath, which is a 60-foot cone of deafening gas, which forces creatures to make a DC 21 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they're deafened for 1 minute, losing their ability to hear and potentially disrupting their communication or spellcasting that requires verbal components. Creatures can repeat the saving throw at the end of their turn, and they'll end the effect early, but even one round of deafness can create chaos in a party. The Steel Dragon lands in B tier because its breath weapons are practical but not overwhelmingly powerful. Acid Breath provides consistent damage while Deafening Breath offers utility, though its impact depends heavily on the situation. Together, they make the Steel Dragon a versatile and clever opponent nonetheless. The Copper Dragon, a mischievous prankster, wields two breath weapons that showcase its mix of creativity and cunning. First, it has Acid Breath, which is going to be a 60-foot line of acid, 5 feet wide, which forces creatures to make a DC 18 Dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 54 acid damage, or half as much on a success. While this damage is respectable, the line shape limits its effectiveness to narrowly grouped enemies, making it harder to hit multiple targets. It also has Slowing Breath. This 60-foot cone of slowing gas forces creatures to make a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, creatures are slowed for 1 minute, reducing their speed by half, limiting them to only one attack per turn, and restricting them to either an action or bonus action, but not both. These effects can disrupt enemy plans and give the Copper Dragon a strategic advantage. Affected creatures can repeat the saving throw at the end of their turns to end the effect early. The Copper Dragon's going to land in B tier because its breath weapon combines decent damage with strong battlefield control. While not as devastating as the other dragons, the Slowing Breath's utility makes it a tricky and frustrating foe for any adventuring party. A fan favorite, the Brass Dragon, known for its chatty and friendly demeanor, brings two breath weapons to the battlefield, though they lean more toward utility than destruction. First is going to be its Fire Breath. This 60-foot line of fire, 5 feet wide, forces creatures to make a DC 18 Dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 45 fire damage, or half as much on a success. While the damage is decent, it's the weakest Fire Breath among the metallic dragons, and the line shape makes it harder to hit multiple targets. It also has Sleep Breath, which is going to be a 60-foot cone of sleep gas, forcing creatures to make a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, creatures are unconscious for up to 10 minutes, unless they take damage or an ally wakes them up with an action. This can neutralize enemies. Its effectiveness depends heavily on the situation and whether the dragon has backup to capitalize on sleeping foes. The Brass Dragon is just going to end up in C tier, because its breath weapon lacks the raw power or versatility of some of the other dragons on this list. The Sleep Breath can be fun and thematic, but it's situational at best, while the Fire Breath struggles to compete with more damaging options from the other dragons. The Deep Dragon, a creature of the Underdark, wields a breath weapon as eerie and unsettling as its subterranean lairs. Its 60-foot cone of spores forces all creatures in the area to make a DC 16 Wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, they take 33 psychic damage and become frightened from the dragon for 1 minute. On a successful save, creatures take half as much damage and avoid the fear effect. A frightened creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of each one of its turns to end the effect early. Psychic damage is a significant advantage here. Few creatures have resisted to it, and the fear effect can completely disrupt a party's coordination, forcing them to avoid the dragon and waste turns. However, the damage is on the lower end compared to the other dragons on this list, and the DC 16 save makes it slightly easier for stronger opponents to resist. The Deep Dragon is going to land on B tier. Because its breath weapon combines reliable damage and potent crowd control, it offers lower numbers and weaker DC saves to keep it from climbing higher. It's thematic and a dangerous option, particularly in the confined spaces of the Underdark though. I really hesitated putting this dragon on the list because I feel it barely fits our criteria of dragons with breath weapons, but nonetheless, here's the Faerie Dragon, one of the smallest and most whimsical dragons in the game, wields a breath weapon that's more about mischief than devastation. It has a puff of euphoric gas, which targets a single creature within 5 feet, forcing it to make a whopping DC 11 Wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the target is overwhelmed with euphoria for a minute, unable to take its reactions, and rolling a d6 at the start of its turns to determine its behavior. If it rolls a 1 through 4, the target takes no actions or bonus actions and uses all of its movement to wander in a random direction. If it lands on a 5 or 6, the target stands still and does nothing except attempt another Wisdom saving throw to end the effect. And while this breath weapon is amusing and fits the Faerie Dragon's personality, it lacks the range, damage, or utility to be effective in almost any combat situation. The lower DC save and limited single target effect makes it feel more like a prank than a serious threat. The Faerie Dragon is going to land in F tier, because while its breath weapon is fun and thematic, it's not practical for combat. It's more of a storytelling tool, perfect for creating chaos and non-lethal encounters. The Lunar Dragon, an enigmatic creature tied to the mysteries of the cosmos, wields a breath weapon that is as chilling as the void. Its 60-foot cone of frost forces all creatures in the area to make a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, creatures take 36 cold damage, and their speed is reduced to 0 until the end of their next turn. On a successful save, they take half damage and avoid the freezing effect. While cold damage is commonly resisted, the added effect of immobilizing enemies is a significant advantage here. Preventing movement for up to a turn can disrupt positioning, hinder escape attempts, or set up devastating follow-up attacks. However, the moderate damage output and reliance on the additional effect for impact keep this breath weapon from climbing in the top tiers. The Lunar Dragon lands in B tier, because its breath weapon balances the decent damage with a tactical control effect makes it solid but not overwhelming in combat. Its cosmic nature and utility make it a fascinating foe for any adventuring party. The Solar Dragon, a radiant being of cosmic might, wields one of the most spectacular and destructive breath weapons in all of dragonkind. This flashing mote of radiant energy can travel to any point within 180 feet, where it blossoms into a 30-foot radius sphere of devastating light. All creatures in this area must make a DC 19 Constitution saving throw, taking 55 radiant damage on a failed save, or half as much on a success. Radiant damage is one of the least resisted damage types in D&D, making this breath weapon consistently powerful. Its ability to target a specific area at range gives the Solar Dragon an unparalleled flexibility, allowing it to unleash destruction from incredible distances. The wide area and high damage ensures that no one within the blast radius will escape unscathed. The Solar Dragon earns an obvious S tier ranking for the sheer combination of raw power, precision, and reliability. It's the perfect embodiment of celestial dominance, making it a nightmare for any party to face. The Shadow Dragon's breath weapon is as terrifying as the darkness it calls home. It exhales a 60-foot cone of shadowy anguish, forcing creatures in the area to make a DC 20 wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, they take 67 necrotic damage and gain 1 level of strife, a debilitating condition that worsens over time. On a successful save, creatures take half damage and avoid the level of strife. Necrotic damage is already devastating, and the level of strife adds a unique layer of horror. Strife effects can stack or escalate based on the campaign's mechanics, representing the dragon's ability to inflict lasting psychological or spiritual damage. Combined with its already high damage output, this breath weapon makes the Shadow Dragon a force of utter devastation. The Shadow Dragon lands firmly in S tier, because this breath weapon is not only destructive but also thematic, leaving behind lingering effects that can make the party's survival feel more like a temporary reprieve. The Time Dragon. A master of temporal magic and manipulation, wields a breath weapon that bends the very fabric of time itself. This 60-foot cone of temporal distortion forces all creatures in the area to make a DC 21 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, creatures take 70 force damage and are stuck in temporal stasis for 1 round. While in stasis, creatures can't move, act, or react, effectively freezing them in time. On a successful save, creatures take half damage and avoid the stasis. Force damage is already one of the most reliable damage types in D&D, and the ability to paralyze enemies in stasis for a round makes this breath weapon both devastating and tactical. The Time Dragon can use this pause to reposition, recover, or set up a devastating follow-up attack, leaving the enemies helpless against its might. The Time Dragon earns its S tier status because of its breath weapon doesn't just do damage, it completely changes the flow of battle, and it's the ultimate control tool, embodying the overwhelming power of temporal mastery. The Dracolich, an undead horror infused with dark magic, retains its destructive power even in death. Its breath weapon is a 90-foot line of lightning, 5 feet wide, forcing all creatures in its path to make a DC 20 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, creatures take 66 lightning damage or half as much on a success. While the Dracolich's breath weapon is identical in mechanics to that of a living blue dragon, its undead nature adds a layer of thematic terror. The lightning is not just destructive, it's infused with the essence of undeath, shattering bodies and demoralizing souls. The narrow line shape makes it ideal for precision strikes, but lacks the versatility of a cone breath weapon if we're hitting multiple targets. The Dracolich earns its A tier ranking because its breath weapon combines immense power and thematic resonance. It's a nightmare to face, particularly when paired with the other dark abilities of this undead monstrosity. The Amethyst Dragon. A creature shrouded in mystery wields 2 unique breath weapons that blend offense, defense, and battlefield control. First, it has Obscuring Mist. This breath weapon creates a 60-foot cube of murky mist that heavily obscures the area, spreading around corners and lingering for 1 minute, unless dispersed by moderate or stronger winds of at least 10 miles per hour. This effect is perfect for creating confusion, blocking sightlines, and forcing enemies into bad positions. While it doesn't deal damage, its utility in controlling the battlefield is undeniable. It also has Scalding Mist. This 60-foot cone of fiery mist spreads around corners and lightly obscures the area for 1 minute unless dispersed. Creatures entering the area or starting their turns there must make a DC 20 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, they take 63 fire damage. On a success, they take half as much. The lingering effect means the damage can stack over multiple turns, punishing enemies who stay in the mist. Being underwater doesn't provide resistance to this damage, making it particularly deadly in aquatic encounters. The Mist Dragon's going to land an A tier because of its blend of high damage, lingering effects, and battlefield manipulation. Its dual breath weapons allow for it to adapt to a wide range of situations, making it a formidable and versatile foe. The Blight Dragon, a twisted force of decay and destruction, wields a breath weapon that is as devastating as it is thematic. It exhales a 30-foot cone of shadowy energy, forcing all creatures in the area to make a DC 18 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, they take 63 necrotic damage or half as much on a successful one. Necrotic damage is one of the harder hitting damage types in D&D, and its thematic ties to decay makes the Blight Dragon's breath weapon as unsettling as it is destructive. While the 30-foot range is shorter than most of the other Dragon's breath weapons, the high damage output compensates, creating an intense burst of deadly energy.